Imagine finding out your wife's night with friends was actually a wild bachelorette party at a male strip club, and that's only the start. I thought I had a great marriage until I found her in a hotel lobby with another guy. What happened next ripped my life apart, as I uncovered layers of lies I never saw coming. She said she needed something exciting after 6 years of marriage. This isn't just a story of betrayal, but about how I fought my way through the aftermath. Stick around. This story's got twists you won't believe. My wife, Emily, was 32 when this story began. We had been married for 6 years, but I met her a few years before that, on her first day at work. I was the one assigned to train her, and what started as casual conversation soon became something serious. We had the same goals, the same vision for the future, and after a year we were inseparable. But it wasn't always like that. Back in college, Emily had a best friend named Sarah. They partied hard, so much that it was a miracle Emily did not flunk out. They were practically wild together, and honestly, I had heard all kinds of stories about their reckless nights, but I figured everyone has that one crazy friend. By the time we met, Emily seemed to have left that life behind. I thought she had outgrown it. I never worried about Sarah after we got married. We even agreed that it was best for our relationship if Emily did not stay too close to her, at least not in the way they were before. I wanted to believe that Emily was now a settled, committed partner. And for years I thought we had a good life together. I had no reason to question it. Then something changed. Out of nowhere, Sarah got engaged, and Emily was buzzing with excitement when she heard the news. She mentioned it at least a dozen times over the next few days. I admit, I was a little surprised too. I mean, from what I had heard, Sarah was as single as they come and had always been the last one to settle down. Emily's excitement felt odd, but I brushed it off. Everyone grows up eventually, right? But deep down, I started to feel this discomfort, this uneasy sense that something wasn't quite right. Then one evening, Emily told me she would be spending the night with her parents and would be back late. I thought nothing of it. She often visited them, so it did not seem strange. I got home from work as usual, cleaned up, and went to take out the trash. As I lifted the bag, I noticed something. A colorful card peeking out through the clear part of the garbage bag. Curious, I glanced at it and saw it was a postcard. I could see a few words printed on it. Bachelorette party, Sarah. Tonight. My heart stopped for a second. There it was right in front of me. She had planned to go to this party, but she never mentioned it to me. And the details? It was in the city at some men's strip club. Something in me snapped right there. I did not want to believe that my wife would lie to me like this. But there it was. Without even thinking twice, I grabbed my keys, got in the car, and drove straight to the club. As I walked in, I felt out of place, but I was determined. I asked around, approaching several women and showing them the card, hoping someone had seen my wife or Sarah. Finally, one of them pointed me in the direction of someone who said she had seen them leave with a couple of guys. I felt my stomach turn. This was Emily, my wife, supposedly visiting her parents, but instead, she was out here, with her wild college friend and 2 strange men. I couldn't understand it, couldn't believe it, but I had to know for sure. I kept pressing, and finally, one of the women told me they were last seen heading to a nearby hotel. The drive to the hotel was a blur. My hands were shaking, my mind racing through every possible scenario. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but every fiber of my being was screaming at me that something was terribly wrong. I called Emily over and over, but each call went straight to voicemail. It was unlike her not to answer, and that only made things worse. I pulled into the hotel parking lot, feeling my heartbeat pounding in my chest. I walked straight up to the front desk, desperate to know if she was here, but the receptionist wasn't going to tell me anything. Policy, she said. I wanted to shout, to demand, but I knew it wouldn't help. So I waited. Minutes passed, each one dragging longer than the last. I kept looking around, hoping I was wrong, hoping she'd call and say it was all a misunderstanding. But then, the elevator doors opened, and there she was. My wife, my Emily, and she wasn't alone. She stepped out with a man I had never seen before, and they looked comfortable, like they had nothing to hide. They were laughing, caught up in the moment, and for a second, she looked genuinely happy. But then she looked up and saw me standing there, waiting. In that instant, everything changed. Her smile vanished, and her face went pale. She looked at me, and it was as if the ground dropped out from beneath her. She covered her mouth with her hand, eyes wide with shock, as if she had been caught in some kind of nightmare. The man beside her looked around awkwardly, suddenly realizing the situation. He mumbled something and quickly walked away, leaving us standing there in the hotel lobby, frozen in silence. "Emily," I said, barely recognizing the sound of my own voice. It was cold, controlled, but I could feel the anger boiling underneath. "What is going on?" She tried to speak, her voice barely a whisper. I made a mistake," she stammered, her eyes filling with tears. She reached out to me, but I stepped back, refusing to let her touch me. "Can we just go home and talk about this?" "No," I said, my voice harsher than I intended. "We're not going anywhere until you tell me the truth. Right here, right now." My words were sharp, each one landing like a punch. She could barely meet my gaze. She glanced around, clearly uncomfortable as people started to notice us. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Not here." But I didn't care about the looks we were getting, about the whispers or stares from strangers passing by. I just needed the truth, and I needed it now. "Did you sleep with him?" I asked, my voice cracking. It was the question I had been dreading, the one I didn't want to ask but had to. She didn't answer right away. Her silence was louder than any confession could have been. She just stood there, her eyes filling with tears that started to stream down her face. Seeing her like that, so broken, part of me wanted to take her in my arms, to forgive her right then and there. But I knew better. I knew that whatever had happened, she had chosen to lie to me, to deceive me, and there was no way to take that back. She grabbed my hand, trying to lead me out of the lobby, but I pulled away. "I'm not going home with you if you can't tell me the truth," I said, my voice barely holding back the emotion that was tearing me apart. Finally, she took a shaky breath and spoke. "I was just having fun, okay?" she admitted, her voice laced with guilt and desperation. "I got carried away. I wasn't thinking. I just needed something different." Her words hit me like a slap. Fun? She called this fun? She had lied to me, betrayed me, and all she could say was that she needed something different. I took a step back, looking at her as if I was seeing her for the first time. This wasn't the woman I had married. This wasn't the Emily who promised to love and honor me. I felt a wave of nausea, the full weight of her words sinking in. My hands started to tremble as I tried to process everything. Her tears were coming harder now. She was practically begging me with her eyes to understand, to give her another chance. "Please," she whispered. "Let's just go home and talk about this. I'll explain everything." But I had heard enough. I took a deep breath, steadying myself as I looked at her, trying to remember the woman I thought I knew. But standing there in that hotel lobby, all I could see was a stranger. "Explain what, Emily?" I said, my voice barely more than a whisper. "That you lied to me? That you didn't care enough to respect our marriage? What is there to explain?" She covered her face with her hands, shoulders shaking as she sobbed, but I forced myself to stay detached. Part of me wanted to reach out, to comfort her, to make it all go away, but I couldn't. Not this time. I felt like my world had shattered, and all that was left were sharp fragments that cut me with every thought. Just then, Sarah, her old college friend, walked into the lobby. She stopped dead when she saw us. Her eyes went from Emily's tear-streaked face to mine, and for a second, she just stood there, caught off guard. But then something shifted in her expression. She looked angry, but not at me, at Emily. "Did you tell him the whole story, Em?" Sarah's voice was sharp, a hint of resentment in her tone. Emily looked away, her face flushed with shame. I glanced between them, my confusion growing. "What is she talking about?" I demanded, looking straight at Emily. She didn't answer, but Sarah did. "You know she told me you two had been separated for months, right?" Sarah said, crossing her arms and looking directly at me. She said you were practically divorced, and that she was just trying to find herself again. Her words felt like a punch to the gut. I turned back to Emily, my heart breaking all over again. I had known her lies went deep, but I hadn't realized they reached this far. She had built an entire story, a twisted justification for whatever it was she thought she needed. And she didn't just deceive me. She deceived everyone around her. I took a step back, feeling the weight of it all crashing down on me. Emily, I said, my voice barely steady. Is this true? She didn't deny it. She didn't even try to defend herself. Instead, she just nodded, barely meeting my eyes. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she mumbled, looking down at her feet. I was lost, okay? I needed something different, something exciting. I never thought it would come to this. I shook my head, feeling a mixture of anger and heartbreak. And you thought lying to me and to everyone else was the answer? You thought that would solve anything? She had no answer for me. Her silence told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't just a one-time mistake or a momentary lapse in judgment. She had made a conscious decision to walk away from everything we had, to betray the trust we had built over the years, and to lie about it. Finally, I managed to find my voice. I can't do this, Emily, I said, my words barely above a whisper. I can't be with someone who would lie to me, who would betray me like this. For a moment, it looked like she wanted to say something, but then she just broke down, her tears spilling over as she realized the finality of my words. She tried reaching for me, but I stepped back, shaking my head. Couldn't let her back in. Not after everything she had done. After a long, agonizing silence, she whispered, I'm so sorry. I wish I could take it all back. But it was too late. I turned and walked out of the hotel, leaving her there in the lobby. My mind was numb, my heart shattered. Everything I thought I knew about my life, about her, had been ripped away in a matter of hours. I drove home in silence, the weight of everything pressing down on me, suffocating me. I couldn't believe that the woman I had trusted, the woman I had committed my life to, could betray me like this. And not just once. She had lied repeatedly, painted me as a stranger in her life just to live out some selfish fantasy. For the next few days, I ignored her calls and messages. She texted me constantly, apologizing, begging me to talk, but I couldn't bring myself to respond. I needed time to process, to figure out how everything had spiraled so far out of control. My mind kept replaying every moment of our marriage, every moment when I thought we were happy, wondering if it had all been a lie. Had she ever really loved me? Or had she just been pretending, going along with the motions until she couldn't take it anymore? After nearly a week, there was a knock on my door. When I opened it, I was surprised to see Emily's brother, Dave. He looked uncomfortable, almost as if he didn't want to be there, but he gave me a nod and asked if we could talk. I let him in, curious and slightly on edge, wondering what he could possibly have to say. Look, man, he started, sitting down and rubbing his hands together nervously. I don't want to make things worse, but you need to know the whole story. I thought Emily was just having a rough patch. But it's more than that. I felt a knot form in my stomach as he continued. He explained that over the past few months, Emily had been going out more, staying out late, and lying not only to me but to him and their parents. He admitted he had tried to confront her, but she always brushed him off, saying she was figuring things out or reclaiming her independence. According to Dave, she had even mentioned considering ending our marriage before the bachelorette party had even happened. She kept saying she was unhappy, that she needed something different, he told me, his face filled with regret. I didn't know it would get this bad, or I would have told you sooner. I sat there, the full weight of his words sinking in. She hadn't just made a mistake that night at the hotel. She had been planning this, lying to everyone close to her, justifying it all in her mind as if she was entitled to act however she wanted. The thought made me sick. Then Dave dropped the real bombshell. There's more, he said hesitantly. She was seeing other people, not just that guy you saw. A few different guys over the last several months. She hid it well, but I caught her a couple of times. When I confronted her, she swore she'd stop, but she didn't. Hearing those words felt like a final blow. Whatever shred of hope or forgiveness I might have felt vanished in that instant. She had been living a lie, deceiving me, her family, everyone around her, all while pretending everything was fine. I realized then that there was nothing left to save. Whatever marriage we had once shared was dead, and it had been for a long time. Dave looked at me, sympathy in his eyes. "I'm sorry, man. You didn't deserve this. None of us saw it coming." I nodded, struggling to keep my composure. "Thanks for telling me, Dave. I appreciate it." He nodded back, standing up and giving me a quick pat on the shoulder before leaving. As soon as he was gone, I broke down, the reality of everything finally crashing down on me. I was done. In the days that followed, I felt like I was moving through a fog. I had made my decision. I was filing for divorce. It was the hardest decision I had ever made, but the thought of staying with Emily, of trying to rebuild something so deeply broken, was impossible. Every time I thought of her, I saw her in that hotel lobby, laughing with that stranger as if our life together had meant nothing. I knew I couldn't live like that. I told her my decision over the phone, too numb and exhausted to face her in person. When she heard the words, she broke down, pleading with me to give her another chance. She said she was willing to do anything, go to counseling, therapy, whatever it took. She swore up and down that she would never hurt me again, that this whole thing had been a mistake. But her words felt hollow, empty, just like the promises she had broken before. I told her it was over. I couldn't forgive her, not after everything I had learned. The divorce process was brutal. Emily fought me at every turn, dragging things out, pleading for more time, then turning angry when she realized I wasn't going to budge. She blamed me for not understanding her, for not supporting her when she was trying to find herself. It was like she was rewriting our history, twisting it to justify her actions, and every conversation with her only made things worse. I started to see just how deeply she had changed, or maybe I was finally seeing who she had been all along. Months went by, and eventually the divorce was finalized. Emily moved out, and I stayed in the house, the place that had once felt like a home but now felt like an empty shell. The reminders of her were everywhere, and no matter how much I tried to move on, it felt like I was haunted by what we had lost. Friends and family tried to support me, but there was only so much they could do. This was a wound that would take time to heal, if it ever would. Then one day, out of nowhere, Emily started calling me again. At first, I ignored her, assuming she wanted to argue or dredge up old wounds. But the calls kept coming, more frequent, almost desperate. She left voicemails, her voice sounding broken and lost, asking me if we could meet up, just for a coffee or a quick chat. She said she missed me, that she couldn't get through the day without thinking about me. She even showed up at my house once, knocking on the door for nearly an hour before finally giving up and leaving. It was clear that she wasn't coping well, but I couldn't let myself get pulled back in. I had already lost too much because of her choices. I knew that if I opened that door, even for a moment, she would try to manipulate me, to twist the situation and make me doubt everything I had been through. So I stood firm. I kept my distance, refused to engage, and eventually, she stopped trying. But her life kept spiraling downward. I heard through mutual friends that she had lost her job because she was too distracted to focus, and that her relationship with her family had become strained. Her brother, who had once been a source of support, had distanced himself from her, unable to handle her constant self-pity and excuses. It was as if she had burned every bridge in her life, all because of her need for something different. The final blow came when I found out she had been arrested for a DUI. Apparently, she had been out drinking alone, and when she got behind the wheel, she lost control and ended up in a minor accident. No one was hurt, thank God, but it was enough to get her locked up for the night. Her father had to bail her out, and from what I heard, he gave her an ultimatum: either get her life together or risk losing whatever support she had left. Hearing about her downward spiral should have brought some sense of satisfaction, but all I felt was sadness. This was the woman I had loved, the woman I had thought I would spend my life with, and now she was a shadow of herself, consumed by her own mistakes. It was tragic, really, but I knew there was nothing I could do to help her. She had made her choices, and now she was living with the consequences. For me, those months were a painful journey of letting go. Over time, I started to rebuild my life. The house, once filled with memories of Emily, slowly became my own again. I redecorated, got rid of things that reminded me of our past, and allowed myself to move forward one step at a time. The silence, once suffocating, became comforting. A reminder that I was finally free from the lies and deception that had consumed my life. Friends and family began to notice the change in me. They saw that I was healing, that I was becoming myself again. I even started seeing a therapist, someone who helped me process everything and understand that none of this had been my fault. There was nothing I could have done to prevent what happened, nothing I could have changed to make Emily stay true. This realization brought a strange sense of peace. I was finally able to let go of the guilt and resentment that had been weighing me down. Then, about a year after the divorce was finalized, I ran into someone unexpected. Sarah. She looked different, more grounded, and, surprisingly, genuinely happy to see me. We ended up chatting for a while, catching up on everything that had happened since that night. Sarah apologized for her role in everything, admitting that she never should have encouraged Emily's reckless behavior. She told me she had distanced herself from Emily, realizing that their friendship had been built on a shared wildness that no longer served either of them. At one point, she mentioned that she had heard about Emily's continued struggles, that she was still living with her parents, still unable to hold down a job, still consumed by bitterness over everything that had happened. I nodded, feeling a strange detachment from the whole thing. Emily was no longer a part of my life, no longer my responsibility. The person she had become was unrecognizable, and I had finally come to terms with that. Sarah and I ended our conversation on a surprisingly warm note. She wished me well, and for the first time in a long time, I felt that maybe I could move on, that I didn't have to carry the weight of this past anymore. I knew I would be okay. As the months passed, I started dating again. Slowly, cautiously, but with an open heart. I knew I would carry the scars of my past, that I would never fully forget the pain Emily had caused me. But I was no longer defined by it. I had found a new strength in myself, a resilience I hadn't known was there. One day, I received an unexpected message from Emily. She wrote a long email, apologizing for everything she had put me through. She admitted that she had lost herself, that she had made choices she could never undo, and that she would always regret the way things had ended. She asked for my forgiveness, not because she expected us to get back together, but because she wanted closure, a way to move forward with her life. I thought about it for a long time before responding. Eventually, I wrote her back, telling her that I forgave her, not for her sake, but for mine. Holding on to the anger and resentment had cost me enough, and I was ready to let it go. I wished her well, sincerely, hoping she would find whatever peace she was looking for. That was the last time we communicated. I never saw or heard from Emily again after that, and honestly, I was okay with it. Life moved on. I moved on. And although I would always carry the memories of what happened, they no longer had power over me. I had survived, and in the end, that was all that mattered. Now, looking back, I realized that what I went through was a painful lesson in trust, forgiveness, and self-worth. I learned that love is not about holding on to someone who does not value you. It is about valuing yourself enough to walk away. I came out of this stronger, wiser, and more certain of what I wanted in a partner. And for the first time in years, I was ready to find it.